Hey guys, this is Brett Young, Taylor Young, and Rod Erb, and you're tuned in to the Be Extraordinary podcast with Erb and Young. Real conversations about business, leadership, and personal development. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Be Extraordinary podcast. We have the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Mick Hunt with us today. You are about to get rocked out of your seat. I've got Mr. Rod Erb and Taylor Young, my partners in crime. The bat in the bat cave, I should say that, with me today. But Mick, man, I tell you what, I think I texted you yesterday and I said, man, we get to actually turn on a camera and do what we get to do on all these events together, which I'm so excited about. You share so freely. You're just rich, full of information, knowledge, experience. And you've been nothing short of a complete rocket ship as far as your trajectory just in this past year, man. I just want to say congratulations on all your success. What goes around comes around, so it is not a surprise that that's happening because your heart is big and you give without expectation. So, man, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on. It's crazy. You know, we're like literally like family, right? And so it is kind of cool to have a recorded everyday conversation, right? Like the everyday conversations we have, the behind the scenes that we talk about and the strategies that we work through. So I'm honored to be here with my family.
That's awesome, man. Well,
it means a lot to us, man. That means a lot to us. And it's so much of how we initially met. What I look at you is that you've had success in so many different areas and seasons. And what we're going to talk about and hopefully tease out of you is a little bit of that process, a little bit of that discipline that you have, the humility, the competence, the confidence is understood. But there's a process about you. There's a way you go about things that I think the listener can really learn from.
I'm excited. Let's do it, man. Let's do it.
Really cool. Well, Tay, I don't know if you want to kick us off, but selfishly, we had talked about this, Mick. You talk about rev ops a lot. And we had this dialogue between the three of us in regards to, kind of how would we define that? And we all had kind of our own interpretation of it, which is funny because we've talked to you, we've worked with you, and the fact that we all three have kind of this different, distinct idea. Would you mind with the listener that's hearing right now, of like what that actually is, why that's such a big proponent of kind of your practice and things that you've focused on in the past? Just to kind of open up, because I have some cool follow-up questions that hopefully will provide some value if people can take away from today and be able to capture some of that. So what is that to you?
Yeah. So for me, inside my insurance business, outside in my leadership programs, RevOps is really the alignment of customer experience, right? And so when you think about every piece of your process that touches a client, whether it's prospect to, in the insurance space, we call it a renewal. Outside of renewal, we call it a resell to a client, right? So everything that can touch a customer as it relates to revenue, to me, that's RevOps. And what we really have to focus on is what are our processes to acquire a new customer, to service a new customer, and then to retain or resell to that same customer. And that's what RevOps is about. So the people, the processes, and the technology that make all of that happen.
So is it revenue operations, not revenue opportunities? Is that right?
It's revenue operations that maximize those client opportunities. Absolutely.
Imagine that.
What are people missing on that, man? What do you see when you see the biggest missed opportunity as far as RevOps, where you go, hey, because what I think about when you say that is every step of the way, every single touch. I think about, most people focus on, hey, client onboarding or the renewal event or whatever it is. There's a couple things. What are the biggest missed opportunities that people are missing?
The biggest missed opportunity is the client experience alignment. And what I mean by that is so many organizations and people focus on the transaction that they miss the transformation, right? And so I work with a lot of big businesses. I work with a lot of small businesses that are going through scale. And what they actually get right is they're not selling a service, right? They're trying to become irreplaceable with their client. And I think a lot of us miss that transformation piece, right? We focus on the tactical, the transaction, right? We've got to do this. And then step 2, we do this. And step 3, we do that. And then we have an if then. that falls in, right? If this happens, then we do that. What we're not trying to do, or what we're missing, is really that transformation of experience. And to me, that's what it's all about, right? The big companies that do it right, it's all about the experience. The companies that are scaling, and I don't care if you're a $500,000 organization, a $5 million organization, a $500 million organization, experience is what really matters.
And
Trying
how do
to
you?
become irreplaceable. I've never heard that before. That's powerful. I'm trying to think about, immediately it makes me think about being in the client's position. Like, what would be irreplaceable to
Right.
me, no matter the situation? Super powerful.
Yeah, I mean, we all have our favorite brands, right? Like I'm a Nike guy down to my socks, right? You've never seen a Nike sock commercial a day in your life, right? Like you've never seen that. But think about the brand and what those brands have done for you from an experience standpoint. Those brands have become irreplaceable, right? Like I'm sure we all have our favorite tech brand, not our favorite tech product, but our favorite tech brand. When you think of your phone, you think of an iPhone or an Apple, right? Or you think of Samsung. Like that's really what it is. You don't think about the product of being a phone. You think about the brand and the experience that that brand is giving you, and that brand becomes irreplaceable. Because I was one of those people that for 20 years was a Samsung guy, and I would have never left Samsung except for marriage. And my wife was an Apple gal. And so in order for me to get married and stay married, I had to go to the Apple brand. But it's those brands that matter, and people are they fight over their brands, right? Well, think about your business. How many of your clients fight over you? How many of your clients are that for you that, hey, I want to be with this business, whether it's an insurance agency or not. I'm here for life, and I'm a fanboy or a fangirl for that business. Most of us don't do that, and that's the experience part that we miss.
So how do you distill that down, right? Because what I think about is it disproportionate value? Is it just giving so much? Is it focusing on what that avatar really wants, what they really value, rather than your perception of what you think they value? How can you get to the heart of what it means to be irreplaceable to somebody in your ecosystem?
No, great question. And here's what the elite businesses do. They listen and adapt, right? How many times again, we just talked about Apple and Samsung. How much are they updating and upgrading and adapting to the world and what their customers want? It's because they listen, right? They have all these forums and private chats that they listen to what people want, and then they deliver what the people want, right? Like, again, I know we met in the insurance industry, right? So I'm going to talk to the insurance industry for a moment. Like, we think that what we do is sell a policy. No, you don't, right? You sell an experience. We might say, oh, well, we sell peace of mind. That's not what the customer thinks. Like, I can promise you that customer thinks you sold them a policy. And for 10 years of them being your client, they think that you sell them policies, right? We know that we don't sell just policies, but to the customer, they think it's a policy. So why don't we give them that experience of what a policy looks like, of breaking down what that policy means? Like we talk so above our clients most of the time, but at the end of the day, what that customer wants that's buying insurance from you wants to make sure is, if I've got a claim, I'm covered. And sometimes we got to keep it that simple, right? And so when we listen to what our customers want and need, that's what we deliver. And we don't try to outthink our customers. We don't try to outsmart our customers, because everyone has access to the internet, to ChatGPT, and to YouTube, right? Don't think that they don't. We don't need to outsmart our consumers, because they can get all the answers that they want when they come to us, right? Deliver what they want. And everybody's different, right? Like there's 4 of us talking right now. I guarantee you, each of us who have insurance, right, have it for a different reason, right? It feels different to each of us. And so instead of trying to give this one solution, this one feel across the board, sometimes you got to cater that experience down.
Damn.
Yeah, that's just almost like an understanding. I think about our discovery process of just trying to uncover of not your perceived pain, but what's really going on before I start to serve this steak, and realize that, they're a vegetarian type deal.
Exactly.
Yeah, I hear that, Mick, and I just think to myself, you say give them what they want from a policy perspective. It's just so profound. It's like, we get on and we're pressing our value proposition. We want them to understand, and I think there's a place for it, right? You tell us about yourself, tell us about tell us your story. We want to tell you our story, but in the end, we're still selling you a policy. So it's like we can go through the formalities, we can build rapport, we can get a little commonality, we can get feeling good to one another. It just really resonates. It's like you can push an agenda, but just like what you just said, Taylor, it's like I'm pushing an agenda, but at the end of the day, I'm talking about a fillet, and you're a vegetarian, and we're not even on the same plane. I'd love to hear, Mick, if you can share some examples of that, man. I love the idea of giving them what they want. How would you put that into practical terms?
Yeah. So, you were going down that path, Rod, right? Like, ask the right questions up front. So make sure you're asking the questions. And even if you have standard questions that you ask every prospect preliminary, right? Well, have the ability to deep dive and go deeper in questions. And where I see particular insurance sales producers go wrong is they're going to ask everybody the same 10 standard questions and make it feel like it's a catered type of approach. It's great that you have 10 standard questions, but what are those follow-up questions that really get that customer or prospect to know that you're building something for them? And so if you ask me to go specific, right? So a point blank question, someone's coming in and they have a need for cyber, right? I'm not caring about the GL, the comp, the property. If they came in because of a cyber ad that we were running or cyber post that we had, or we called about cyber, keep the main thing the main thing. And where people go wrong is, well, I want to be your agent for everything. Well, if this prospect came to you for general liability or workers' comp or because of cyber, sell that. Like, focus on that. Now, that does not mean, for everybody listening or watching, that you don't cross-sell. But you do that after you've won the main thing. Always win the main thing. And when you talk about businesses and consumers, right? Like, again, I love Nike. That's my brand. I go in looking for shoes. If I go online, if I go into a retail store, I'm looking for shoes. Nike's going to give me shoes. Now, when it's time to check out, they're going to show me the socks and the headbands and the little mini basketballs and all of that stuff, right? Like, even if it's online, you get those pop-ups, right? Like, before you can check out, it's like, oh, you might be interested in this. Well, that's how we've got to be able to do our business as well. Give the people what they came there for. And then right before close, right before they give you the credit card, people like you are also interested in this. Do you want to have a conversation about that? But make it as simple as possible. And again, that's where we go wrong, trying to sell all the features and benefits that we have, not listening, not adapting, and building the right policies or the right services for the customer that come to us.
Mick, along those lines, if I may, one quick follow-up. Are you a script guy? Are you for scripts or against scripts? And if you are or aren't, why would you or wouldn't you be with regard to kind of going down what brought them in?
Yep. I'm going to say this very clear, Rod. I am for preparation. I like being prepared. All of us played sports, right? There's nothing better than preparation. That's being prepared for every scenario. So I am always going to be over prepared so that I can take conversations where they need to go. So my script is the preparation. My script is, hey, I know I need to find out these 5 things about this business. I am not going to script those 5 things because how I talk to Brett is going to be drastically different than how I talk to Taylor. I'm going to get those 5 things accomplished, but I don't need a script to get there because to what we just talked about earlier, once I know Taylor's a vegetarian, all these other questions I had for Rod go out the window, but I'm still going to get to where I wanted to get to.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Great follow-up. Thanks for that. That's great.
Mick, I have a question for you. So this revenue operations idea, I mean, there's just so many facets of it. It's beautiful. And I love how it just all transcends back to customer experience. I wrote down, create multiple avatars that have different needs. The reason that they use you or they have insurance. What would it look like to communicate these consistently at scale, right? Like per the person that you're talking to instead of just this one catch-all, across your whole entire business. But when you've had such a cool vantage point, not only just for tens of thousands of agents, thousands of agency owners, but also outside of the insurance business. And business is very similar, right? It all kind of rhymes. It's the same.
Yep.
What what is the thing, if you were to define, I mean, you just went through revenue operations. If I'm listening to this and I'm like, wow, there's a lot to keep me busy there, I got a lot to room for improvement on all of it. We all do. But what is the thing that you see is the lowest hanging fruit? The lowest hanging fruit when you walk into a shop, when you walk into a business, no matter what industry it's in, what is the one that either doesn't get attention, or is just the highest leveraged one that's not being paid attention to? But what is the one that usually gets missed that I can focus on and get the highest lift the quickest?
Yep. So, and it's the same for every business. And it's something we talked about, right? It's knowing who your ideal client is and servicing and building everything around your ideal client. And before I go forward, we always get this question. I think Rod or Taylor, you asked me this when we were together and we were talking about ideal clients. Well, if I'm focused on my ideal client, what happens to someone who's not an ideal client, right? And what I told you was, it doesn't mean that we don't, have business with non-ideal clients, but from a marketing strategy, from a service component build out, from a onboarding strategy, we're going to put our energy on building that for our ideal client. So that doesn't mean that, if your ideal client is franchise restaurants, does that mean you never write an HVAC supply company? No, it doesn't mean that. It just means that all of our services and strategies are built for restaurants. We're going to put our energy into restaurants. If we receive a free lead from an HVAC supply company, then doggone it, we're going to service that too, or we're going to write that too. But all of our focus and energy is on ideal clients. And so what I see, I don't want to say they missed the mark, but what they don't do is build that first and really be intentional about who your ideal client is. And don't be ashamed to say, all right, this is who we are. Because I think a lot of times, especially in the insurance space, because we're in the service providing industry, right? Like, we feel like we can't say no. Well, yeah, you can. You can say no. No is a complete sentence, by the way, right? You can say no. And it's totally fine to really take a step back. I don't care how long you've been in business. I don't care what your business is, and say, all right, we need to adapt, because that's what the elite businesses do. We need to adapt to who our ideal client is and really define who that is. Like, understanding, where are we profitable? What do we enjoy? And I think that's another thing. People miss what they enjoy. Like, who are the people we enjoy having conversations with? Well, that's an ideal client. That's what we're going to do. So, Brett, I say the biggest thing that people can do today is truly identify their ideal client. And I don't mean just naming a niche market, right? Like, oh, restaurants are it, or HVAC supply companies are it. Like, really drill down into what that means. What does the decision maker look like? What does the business look like? What are the core values of the people that we want to do business with? Because you can find anybody, I promise you. With as much information as we have today, you can find your exact matches.
And also, it just seems like, what problems do those people typically have? What challenges? Right. That's what I think about a lot, is really obsessing about where that person sits, what their day, week feels like, what keeps them up at night, what would make their life easier. Yeah, that's we've seen both ends of the spectrum, and we've probably been on both ends of the spectrum, to where being overly disciplined, let's say, like, if you're a commercial producer and you fall into a niche in our industry, right? And you go, hey, I'm not writing anything else. I'm only writing this. And then you go, okay, pat on the back, right? And then you go, well, or you could be the other way, where you just write everything and you're a generalist. There's some sort of balance, and that really clarifies for me to say, it's like the Jim Rohn quote that I love. It's like, be happy with all that you have while you pursue all that you want, right? You're in this pursuit of the ideal client and create an experience that disproportionately serves that person and adds a tremendous amount of value. But while you're on the way, hey, you may get thrown an open look. Why don't you go ahead and take that one, or take the layup, and learn from it. Just don't spend your days and weeks and et cetera, building a plan and a business plan around it. That's kind of what I hear.
Yeah, for sure. And I'd even say, for the agency owner that is a generalist, you can still define your ideal client in a generalistic approach too. Right? So maybe instead of taking every business, we do write small businesses between, I'll make this up, between $1 million and $10 million of revenue that are located in this geographic area. You can still be somewhat generalistic, right? but really drill that down, because everyone that you interact with should not be an ideal client. Right? If they don't have the pain points that you solve, don't waste your time.
Yeah, I wanted to ask in regards to back to RevOps and that whole theme. I think about what's available. I think one of the biggest things, say as a business owner or producer, there's this lady in the red dress squirrel mentality of like taking of the focus, or I don't have enough time, or I don't have enough money to focus on that. And I wanted you to speak to that, because what I hear when RevOps is like, hey man, but what if you knew what you were missing? What if what you were missing provided everything you can ever imagine, and it was probably simpler than you think it is, and you're perceiving this as this time and energy sink, and you don't have capacity? What would you speak into that person, and what have you found in your coaching of people to say, give us some case studies, if you will, on dispelling that myth, if you believe it is a myth?
Yeah, it totally is a myth. And you kind of were walking down that path, right? Like the key to RevOps is to be simple, right? So it's having simple processes. There's a difference between a process and a procedure, right? Like a process should be your 5 to 7 steps to get something done. The procedures are how you go in and do that. And I'm not a procedure person. I'm much more of a process person. And so keep your processes as simplistic as possible, because you don't want to send yourself or your staff down rabbit holes, meaning, hey, we've got this 37-step process. No, you don't. That's a procedure. I promise you. Right? If our sales process, and I'm going to make this up, if our sales process, the component of RevOps is, all right, we're going to do an interview process, then we're going to have a quoting process, then we're going to have a proposal process. Like, keep it that simple, because we're working with adults. The more granular that you make your processes, the more room you have error for excuses, which is the biggest detriment to every business and agency, right? Or the excuses to not get something done. So definitely the time component really is day one of just setting up what your processes are. So what are our revenue touch points, right? What do we need those touch points to really do at the end of the day? Like high level, what do we need them to do? How do we go from this part of the process to the next, right? What are the checkpoints that we need to have? And that's as simple as it is, man. And I will definitely tell people, use technology as much as you can. I'm not a proponent, you guys know this, of agency management systems, because they were not built for revenue touch points. They were built to store documents and notes. And for whatever reason, now we think the world of insurance is in an agency management system. So I'm definitely going to say, make sure you have the right technology that can move things through your revenue generating processes. So again, first step is identify your ideal client. Second step is, how do you market to that ideal client? Third step is then, how do you sell and close that ideal client? Fourth step is, how do you onboard them to your business? And then fifth step is, how do I renew them or resell to them? That's it. Those are the 5 components of RevOps. It's that simple, and don't try to make it any deeper than it needs to be. It's always going to evolve as you grow, right? You can go as deep as you want when you're several years in, but initially, keep it to those 5 things.
So good. I just wrote process versus procedure. I don't think I've ever heard of somebody explain it that simple, Mick. Honestly, I don't even know if I knew that, candidly. I think process and procedure, I think them interchangeably. But the fact that you make the distinction between process and procedure, I think is really, really cool. I mean, I think process is simple. Procedure is documented step-by-step how-tos. It's like framework and sequencing versus follow these steps to get this outcome. It's really, really good, man. Really, really good.
Yeah, here's a very simple explanation of that, Brett. Like, I'm going to go work out when we're done with the interview. So first thing I'm going to do is change my shirt, change my pants, put on shoes. That's the process. The procedure is, got to put my right arm in the shirt first, then my left arm. Then I got to do a bow tie knot on my shoe. Like those are procedures. And when we're dealing with adults and adult learners, we've got to be much more process than procedure. I mean, think about it. When we go learn something new, or we've got a problem on the weekend, right? Like Rod's refrigerator, for whatever reason, stopped working. Rod's going to go to YouTube. Rod's going to see a 3-minute video, a 10-minute video, and a 35-minute video. Rod probably is going to look at the 3-minute video first. And if he can't get
No doubt.
then he's probably going to skip the 10 and go to the 35. The 35 is the procedure. The 3-minute is the process, because Rod's an adult. Rod's smart. Like, Rod's going to say, oh, okay, I need this wrench. I need to turn this breaker off. And then I need to unbolt this and I'm done. Right? Like, that's the difference.
true.
And that's how people learn. And that's what, again, RevOps, keep it simple. Like, you don't want to inundate your people who are simplistic by nature, especially in this modern world where they can get a 90-second answer. Don't give them a 15-minute version, because you just turn them off.
I just did that on YouTube yesterday. I was looking at like a physical therapy exercise for my foot and ankle, and I was laughing because I saw one that was 12 and I saw one that was like 2.5, and I absolutely 100% clicked on the 2.5. And then guess what happened after I watched the 2.5? They served me something else, and I was like, oh, okay, yeah, they built some authority with me. They've actually shown, yeah, it's fascinating.
Yeah. So with your staff, and I'm talking more for staff, not customers now, but keep things simple, man. Like, keep it simple, keep it short. Don't undermine your people by not being intelligent. They probably wouldn't be on your team if they were not intelligent. And remember that, right? Like, that's what they want. And then from the customer side, same thing. We're all consumers. Short chunks is what we want.
Talk to me about RevOps when the simplicity is speaking to me. Anytime you touch your customer, what's my outcome when I touch, and what are the interactions that I have with my customer? You mentioned the insurance business, you have renewal, you have anytime they make a policy change, you have anything, birthdays, whatever, with any trigger points that there's interaction, whether it's the written word, whether it's the phone, whether it's person to person. But then you also have the team that is executing those, right? So you talk a lot about, standards and process, and hey, we do it this way every time and track that data. One of the big reasons for a CRM is, right, to be able to track that data and see when we do interact with our customer, what are we doing and what happened. What is kind of the elite RevOps business owner, producer do that maybe the average doesn't when it comes to standards, consistency, and the delivering of their product?
Yeah. So I always ask this question. First question is, forget what I'm trying to put out to the customer. Where could the customer feel friction? That's what I want to solve. And so when we talk about keeping it simple and what does that communication or what's that strategy look like, we have to remember, especially when we're talking insurance, no one's calling us or reaching out because they want to, right? Like there's a need. And because there's a need, that means that there was friction somewhere, right? So my touch points are going to make sure that I explain the friction point, give them resolutions, and then always provide next steps or what the follow-ups are going to be, right? I don't like blindly communicating with customers. I don't like blindly communicating with prospects. So keeping things simple into, hey, this is why this interaction. So if I'm being proactive, this is what we're talking about. This is why it's important. These are the next steps or the bullet points that we're going to need. And then here's when you're going to hear from me again. Those 4 things as simple as possible, right? If it is an inbound, and so let's just say it's a phone call or a customer request or something in email, I'm going to do what's hard, Taylor. I'm going to listen. I'm going to, as one of my mentors, Les Brown, tells me, listen to the listening. So I'm going to actually hear and try to understand what they're really asking and why. So before I just give a response, I'm going to listen to the listening. Like, what are you saying? And then what are you not saying? Right. And then I'm going to solve that problem. And I'm going to explain what it takes to solve that problem, when we can turn this around, and then what the follow-ups are always going to be. And again, keep things that simple because that's what people want. So I'm always going to have a 4-pronged approach with everything that I do.
Yeah. So I love that. Why you called, the bullets of what you're going to do. Yeah, it leaves me with concise clarity. Because we were just on a training the other day and we're talking about, hey, no one calls their insurance agent because they want to talk, man. They're
They
calling
don't.
it, right? There's a pain there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mick,
unfortunately / fortunately, we're just not in the business of sexiness from a consumer standpoint, right? So give them the things that they want and need. And another thing, that elite businesses do is you're not solving today's problem or today's challenge, right? Like you're being a little proactive and predictable for the future. So again, if Rock calls with this problem today, I get this is a today problem. But part of the listening to the listen is, all right, How do we make sure Rod doesn't have to call back when this happens again? Because in our business, in the insurance business, right, there's a lot of repeatable service challenges or repeatable service requests. So how do I give Rod enough information so that he understands that when this happens again, because it probably will, this is what he needs to do? That's why I always list out those bullet steps, because now Rod can go back to that and remember, oh, I added a vehicle. This is going to happen every time. Or I requested this certificate of insurance. This is going to happen every time. And so now I don't have to call Rod because I know what's going to happen. And so that's another component, not necessarily RevOps, but just an overall client communication strategy. So none of us get paid for phone calls. At least you guys might. You might charge for phone calls, but like none of us get paid for phone calls. None of us get paid to respond to email. So why force that upon our clients?
Resolve the issues of
super
tomorrow.
strong.
Really good. Really good.
Mick, you said something a minute ago that I caught, and in my preparation, I was checking out Mick Unplugged, and you talk about the Mick factor on there, conceived through Les Brown. Talk to us, if you wouldn't mind, about how the Mick factor specifically helps entrepreneurs. I know we've talked a lot about customer journey and customer experience, but I'm interested for a second, just to the entrepreneurs that are listening, what unique principles set the Mick factor apart from other leadership frameworks? If you could go into that for us.
Yeah. So again, my mentor, Les Brown, when we were talking about the 10-year-old me, which is where my real journey of entrepreneur and leadership started at 10 years old, right? Making a promise and a commitment to change my mother's life and to create a different legacy for our family. And Les was asking me, well, walk me through how you got there, right? So at 10 years old, what are the things that you did? And he goes, okay, I got it. You created 4 pillars. And they actually are the acronym of your name. And I was like, okay. And so the acronym for the Mick factor is mastery. So you got to master something that you love. Find something that you love and master it, right? So that's the M. The I is innovation, especially when we talk about this new modern world. The people, forget the businesses, the people that you see evolve are those that were innovative, those that were trying to think of solutions to problems that don't exist. The C is character, so do everything with dignity. And then the K is the power to keep going. So we all know we're entrepreneurs. If we could write a business plan and it worked, right, from the moment that we wrote it, we'd all be billionaires and trillionaires. Adversity is going to happen. Those that succeed are those that kept going. And so that's what the Mick factor is. It's building your principles around whatever it is that you do, master it. Right? Like Bruce Lee has a famous saying, I fear not the man who practices over 10,000 kicks once. I fear the man that practices one kick 10,000 times because you've mastered that kick. And so with your business, right? Like whatever your business is, truly love it and master it. And that's why I tell salespeople, I tell business leaders, like focus on your main thing and keep the main thing and just master it. Right? Innovation. How are we evolving, especially today? We can be very transparent with the technology that exists. How can we be innovative with the things that we're doing? How can we be innovative with consumer touch points, with the customer experience, right? How do we innovate that? What are our core values? So the character, what are our core values? And how not only do we align with it, but how do we interact with our customers that align with those same things? And when the going gets tough, how are we going to keep going? And that's literally what I work with businesses on, is mastering those things, mastering those components, because that's the evolution of leadership.
Man, we've been talking about this a lot lately within our walls, and now that you're sharing that, it ties back every conversation we have. It's kind of like the fitness coach that says, hey, what diet should I eat, Mick? And somebody says, well, it depends on what your goals are. Right. And so it's almost like, what role are you in? What are you after? And so much in the personal development or the professional development space, we are guilty of being the guy that Bruce Lee talks about, is just all the different kicks. And then, when you can focus on, like I was thinking about, I was having a conversation this morning, focusing on that one thing you're looking to learn, and then diving deep into that one thing and actually mastering that skill, learning about it, doing the activity, learning about it, seeking mentorship, and how much further we could get in a shorter amount of time. and then realize that mastery. And if there's another skill that you want to pursue because your goals and your ambitions require it, perfect. Well, you could do the same thing with that skill. But I know that when I'm moving the slowest and I'm not feeling progress, it's usually because I'm distracted and the main thing is not the main thing. And quite frankly, a lot of the time, the main thing is the stuff that maybe I'm a little bit uncomfortable with. And so I go back to, I'm used to solving these problems, so let me be distracted. Let me keep kind of doing that because that's the kick I know, when in reality I know, hey, that's the kick I really need to study and I need to do 10,000 times. That's a great word.
Yeah, agree, man. And what's crazy is, and you're going to see it released probably in a few weeks, but I'm working on this series titled The Bed Has Got to Go, right? And the quick analogy is all of us are in a relationship. We're all married, right? And so when it becomes marriage time, right? Whose bed are we keeping, right? Are we keeping Rod's bed? Rod, I know about your bed, brother. Like, we ain't keeping that bed, right? Do we keep our spouse's bed, right? Like, maybe a lot of bad things happen, but for business leaders, for entrepreneurs, that bed, BED, represents old beliefs, old excuses, and old decisions. And so the bed has got to go, meaning we've got to be able to have new beliefs. We've got to be able to eliminate excuses and be able to make those tough decisions, right? Because again, when we focus on outcomes versus outputs, it's all about the beliefs that we have, the excuses that we're no longer willing to tolerate, and making those bold decisions. And so, Taylor, like, you exactly just walked down the path of what my next little series is about.
Gosh, that's good, man.
Yeah. We can't lay in yesterday's bed and expect tomorrow's decisions, you know? It just doesn't happen.
And does it illuminate the fact that when you look up and out of what you want or what you believe you want, acknowledging that those old ways of thinking, those beliefs, those decisions no longer align, and then the willingness to kill those decisions, those old beliefs on the spot to be able to create space for new ones? Because Brett and I were having a conversation this morning.
Yeah.
It's like you're going to filter your constraint, and until you make room in your cup, you're not going to, that new water is not going to be able to get poured in there, right? So do you find that's the sequence? Is goal, what am I after? Beliefs, process, what is no longer serving that goal? Let me kill it and let me fill it with stuff that is.
Bro, you just nailed it on the head. You said it very eloquently. Like, and I can give you a real life example without naming this business name. I'm working with, when you think of the largest credit card entity, right? Maybe they reside in America, can get there quickly, right? So I'm working with them on just that. Like, how do we update our beliefs? Because what we believed truly about our consumers yesterday is no longer validated anymore, right? Like, it's no longer the truth of who our consumers are. So we need to change our whole belief point, right? And then from there, and I'm talking to the senior leaders. So now, how do our vice presidents, our managers, our directors, how do we get them to not have excuses on why we're making this change? Why we're changing who not only our ideal client is anymore, but truly changing a level of a card and a credit system that doesn't exist today. And then how do we empower them to make those decisions? And that truly is where the BED acronym came from, was, oh, we've got to change our beliefs. Great, they're doing that now. What we have to prepare for is to eliminate excuses, because they're going to happen, and they're going to happen more internally than externally. And then how do we empower our leaders to make the bold decisions, right? And that's exactly what it's about, right? You can't evolve if you're not willing to change your beliefs. A lot of times people think, well, this is who we are, so this is who we have to be, and we can change some things to meet that. Well, what if who you are is no longer valid for the customers that you're serving or the communities that you serve? Well, then you need to change your beliefs, and it's totally okay to change your beliefs.
Yeah, or it seems like just don't run that race. Don't go after that goal. Change your goal. We always say that, right? You had two options, right? If you don't like the way that process looks, but where we can sometimes get lost is I got this goal that I really want, but I'm not willing to give up those things, right? And I think about your podcast before we turned on the camera. You've had just extraordinary following and engagement since you started that podcast earlier this year. And what a gift. But you were talking to us a little bit about the process, and not to get into the nitty gritty, but it was just an understanding of like, hey, what do the top podcasts do? Like, what am I after? What does that process look like? Who do I need to go? I just hear that when you went over that, and a little bit of what has made Mick Unplugged become such an extraordinary success was just the willingness to, follow that playbook and that process rather than cling to the ideal in which you started with.
No, wholeheartedly. And again, translating that into the business, number one, understanding your purpose. I call it your because, right? Like understanding your purpose, who aligns with you, and then ultimately, Taylor, like what's your overall goal? Like what are you trying to accomplish? So for every business leader that's listening, whether you're in the insurance business or not, at the end of the day, what are you trying to accomplish? And that's going to be different for everyone, right? Like some people are trying to build a lifestyle agency. Some people are, I'm trying to get to the elite. Some people it's like, hey, I'm just trying to put food on the table. And that's totally okay. Like whatever your purpose is your purpose. And then figure that out. Like, and when I say figure it out, it takes time to understand how to get to that goal. And it's going to change, right? Like when I started the podcast, I didn't start it to monetize. I started because Les Brown told me to start a podcast. It was that simple. Les Brown and Daniel Song and Ryan Hanley were like, dude, you need a podcast. And I was like, I'd rather just do YouTube videos. And they were like, no, go do a podcast. And I was like, no, I just want to do YouTube videos. And then Les was like, I'll be on the podcast. And I was like, that's different. I'll do a podcast, right? Like, so it was really that. But then, even then, again, I wasn't starting to monetize. It was just, all right, let me go find some people I can reach out to. And so I talked to a couple of my friends. I talked to a Kenny Anderson, and he was like, yeah, I'll be on the podcast. I talked to Merrill Hodge. He was like, I'll be on the podcast. And then from there, it was like, okay, I'll release one episode a month because I've got like 3 or 4 people that said they'll do it. That'll give me time to find guests. Well, the Les Brown episode releases and it goes crazy. The Kenny Anderson episode releases and it goes crazy. And so then it went from, okay, there's eyeballs on the podcast. Well, what more can I do? Like, you can actually make money on a podcast? I didn't know that. Like, as transparent as I am, right? I did not know that you can make, like an everyday person like us, didn't know you can make money on a podcast. I assumed that like the Joe Rogans and the Shannon Sharps, because they're tied to these bigger networks, the network was just paying them. I didn't realize that podcasting is like the new TV, right? When it comes to advertising and advertising dollars, like there's a ton of advertising money in podcasts. And so I said, okay, now that I know you can make money, how do I make the most money that I can make? And that means, you've got to be attractive to podcast networks, right? Like the podcast networks are like the TV channels, right? So you've got your ABC, your TNT, your USA. Like, how do I get attracted to those guys? And then I talked to a couple to see what they wanted. I wasn't attractive at that time, right? But what does it take? And so then I just started doing those things, right? Like changing little things on the podcast, just from my viewpoint. Then I started ranking on Apple, and then I had a conversation with Apple, like, well, what do you look for in podcasts? Like, is this real? And then from there, it just kind of blew up. But what I did was I just had a strategy of all the places I was trying to get to. And I got to those places one by one, right? Like, if I know I want to be to the top, you just don't get to the top, right? In order to get to the top, I got to get to the first rung of the steps. All right. How do you get to the first rung and get there quickly? That's what I did. All right. How do I get to the second rung? Figured that out and done that quickly. And then it was like, I can skip the third rung now, right? Because I've got enough strength that I can go from rung 2 to rung 4. So I skipped the third stage and went straight to 4. And then it was like, okay, now that I'm at 4, I can see the top, right? Like I can see the top of this ladder. How do I get there? And that's where I'm at now, is how do I get to the very top? And damn it, I'm going to do it.
By the way, for everybody listening, episode 3, Les Brown. That's funny. We talked a lot about Les Brown today, but as I was preparing, that's the first thing I noticed was Les Brown's name on all over your page. So I think that's
Les Brown. And actually, my new site is going to be mickhuntofficial.com to come out later. But between Les and Damon John and Robert Irvine, they've poured so much into me over the last couple of years that like I'm just learning, right? Like the power of mentorship is crazy. So I will tell every business executive, if you own a business, one, you need mentors, more than one.
Mm.
If you're the leader of a business, you need mentors, right? More than one. The best thing that I've done in 2023 and 2024 is just invested in mentorship and truly trying to seek wisdom. Like the one thing that Les and Damon both say is this about the wisdom that you gain, right? Like Damon's like, Mick, I'm going to tell you every mistake I made so you don't have to make it, right? Like that's what I'm trying to do. And Les will tell you, you know, people will say experience is the best teacher. No, it's wisdom, right? Because if someone experiences losing, that's the only experience that they have, right? But the person that overcame it, like that's wisdom and that's what you want to seek. So for me, understanding the type of mentors that I wanted, and it's not about the doors or avenues that they could open for me because that wasn't the reason I sought them out. It was more, how can I get poured into, right? So like a Robert Irvine who literally calls me every Friday, right? No matter where in the world he is, because he's only home like 20 days a year. But for him to give me 2 or 3 tips to work on over the next week or just to see how I'm doing, like those things are priceless and you can't put value on that. And that's what mentorship is to me, is to guide me, to challenge me, and then to give me, I don't want to call it the shortcuts, but to give me the lessons learned so that I don't have to do that. And that's what I'm doing now is I've learned so much that now that I'm giving back so that other people can gain from the lessons I've learned and the insights and wisdom that I've gotten from my mentors.
You know, you say that, Mick, and I won't speak for Brett or Taylor, but there have been numerous counts of us being together where you've got that on full display, and your heart is, you know, as big as they come, and you're generous, and just the way you go about explaining things and pouring into people with no, I think Taylor, you mentioned this out of the gate, but with no even thought of what's in it for me other than just let me pour into other people. It just, you know, you embody that, and it's one of the things I find most attractive about you. I know, you know, you've led hundreds of people, and you know, you're known for your pedigree is, you know, I triple production and I grow businesses and I lead, you know, hundreds and hundreds of people. But to me, all those accolades, while they're great, they make you credible. They certainly, you know, emphasize your authority. Just the way, just being around you to me is just. You just embody all those things I just said, and I just to hear you say that on this show, it's an honor, man. It's an honor.
It's also,
I mean,
yeah, go ahead, Mick.
well, I was just gonna say, like, genuinely, that's who I am because none of us get to where we are by ourselves, right? Like, none of us know the answers to the test, and so if I can help in any way, like I'm going to, because I received that same help, right? Like I have coaches and mentors because I'm not where I ultimately want to be in different facets, right? Like I don't know the world of podcasting still, but I'm figuring it out with coaches, right? I don't know the world of media that I've been exposed to in the past year, but I have mentors and coaches who have. And so like those are the things that life is about. So I'm always going to be that vessel. If I can help, I can't help in everything. But if it's something that I know or lessons that I've learned, I'm definitely going to help.
Yeah, I was just gonna say
Mick,
it's such a.
Well, I'm sorry, Tay. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say it's such a clue, man. You're a big deal in our space, right? So if you're at an event, you're one of the big dogs everyone's trying to talk to. So I just find it so refreshing, the humility of, hey, no, but yeah, but my goals would say that I need to seek out mentorship. I think it'd be very easy to have success and rest on your laurels and be the big dog and pump that ego. But for you, that there's still so much to learn, still much to gain. That's what I hear in your willingness to kind of say, hey man, I only know this one thing I'm an expert, but this other thing I'm a student, and let me find somebody who's the expert and let me play with that
All day.
Well, gang, I'll tell you what, it's a pleasure, Mick. You're such a process guy, and I just hear process even with this just new frontier that you're going on. And achievement is never the same, but it rhymes. It's like every challenge is different, but it kind of is the same. And it's no secret why you're doing amazing things. It's no secret why you're having a lot of success. It's no secret why you're continuing to help a lot of people. And I tell you what, the three people that you see on this screen, you have helped a tremendous amount. And I'm just like Rod said, and Taylor, I'm very grateful for your mentorship, very grateful for your leadership. And now you've been able to help the people in our network who listen to this podcast. So for that, extremely grateful. And I took 4 pages of notes, by the way. I didn't do a lot of talking because I was trying to listen as much as possible. These guys ask great questions. But man, thank you so much. Where can the listener find you? Which, by the way, just open up one of your social media apps. That would be first thing, but you'd probably find you. But if the listener wants to seek out mentorship, find you, get some help, engage you, where is the best place for them to accomplish that?
Yeah, so I'd say LinkedIn or Instagram if it's social. So Mick Hunt on LinkedIn, Mick Unplugged on Instagram. And then MickHuntOfficial.com is where you can see and find all things that I'm doing in the world.
It's amazing. God, Mr. Worldwide, baby. Let's go. Well, I'll tell you what, Mick, we'll have you on here in the next sequence, and it'll be fun to see the progress because, when we talk about momentum, you are in massive momentum, and I know your schedule is super busy, so for you to take the time means a lot. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you got a lot of value out of the show, which there's no way you listened to it and you didn't, please share this with somebody who is learning and is looking to be a student. And also give Mick some love. If you see him on social media, hit that follow button, hit that like. But ultimately, everything that he does exemplifies extraordinary. So super, super grateful to have you on the show, Mick. Thank you so much.
I appreciate you all. Next time, let's do it in person.
Yes,
Love
sir.
that. Dig that. All right, guys. Thanks. Bye-bye for now.